Good afternoon, everybody. We'll just give people a few minutes just to log on, and then we'll get cracking. Hopefully you can all see my screen. It's funny how we still ask that after 5 years post-COVID, but there you go. You're never quite sure, are you? Okay, 20 more seconds and then we'll get cracking. All right, okay. Thank you everybody for taking some time out of your Wednesday to attend this Brookbanks seminar. I really appreciate it. I hope you're all doing well. I'm beginning to get that winter cold that everyone seems to be getting. So if my voice goes halfway through, I'll just have to try and do the rest of it via sign language, which I don't know. But I've had a strepsil, so we'll power on. I'll just draw your attention. There's a Q&A button at the top of your screen. So if you've got any questions, I will pick them up at the end. You can either send them to everybody or you can send them to me directly if you so wish. So we're going to be spending the next 20 to 25 minutes talking about Section 106 agreements, contributions, and more specifically around recovery. And we won't spend a huge amount of time on what Section 106 agreements are because I am making the assumption that a lot of you attending this call will already be familiar with Section 106 agreements. But first of all, just a little bit about me. So that's me with longer hair. I took the plunge earlier this year and decided to get it shaved very short, which has gone down with mixed reactions, friends and family, but there you go. I've been at Brookbanks since the start of the year. Prior to that, I was 20 plus years in house building. So I've worked for most of the main players, Barratt's, Taylor Wimpey, Vistry, the Barclay Group, in their commercial teams. So very, very familiar with housing developments, the commercial side of residential house building, and obviously part of that is Section 106 contributions. And if you ever wanted to contact me, my email address and my LinkedIn are there on the screen. So as far as an agenda goes for our session this afternoon, so we're going to start by just looking at what the purpose of a Section 106 agreement is, and the types of obligations that are typically identified within a Section 106 agreement. We'll then go on to talk about recovering Section 106 contributions, or specifically recovering unspent Section 106 contributions, I should say. We'll talk about why Section 106 contributions can go unspent. We'll talk about the concerns that developers may have about approaching local planning authorities or LPAs to recover unspent Section 106 contributions, and how the recovery of those contributions can be best approached. And towards the end, we'll just have a handy checklist of practical next steps for developers. So let's dive straight in then and take a look at the purpose of Section 106 agreements. So it's grounded in law, as you'd expect. It is Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act from 1990, and the purpose of it was to mitigate the adverse effects of development. So to provide financial contributions to the LPA to improve the local community as a result of the adverse impacts, and wherever you stand on the house building spectrum will dictate whether you think that development is an adverse impact or not. But that's the point or the purpose of a Section 106 agreement. There are three key rules that Section 106 contributions have to abide by. Firstly, they must be necessary. Secondly, they've got to be directly related to the development. And then finally, fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. So you can't really have a 10-unit new development with £20 million worth of Section 106 obligations. That wouldn't be fair nor reasonable. Section 106 agreements are usually bilateral, so that means they're signed by both the local planning authority and the developer. You do sometimes get unilateral undertakings. So that's really where a Section 106 agreement is pulled together by the developer themselves. So there's no LPA involvement. They're normally quicker but less flexible, but they do avoid some of the delays in Section 106 agreement negotiations. So anyone who has read the recent HBF report on Section 106 agreements will know that the average time, I think, is about over 500 days for a Section 106 agreement to be fully negotiated and finalised. And so in some cases, that can be sped up a bit by a unilateral undertaking. A Section 106 agreement is a deed which binds to any successors. So what that means is if the land gets sold after a Section 106 agreement is in place, or if the developer gets bought out by another developer, which quite often happens, it just means that the obligations remain. So a developer can't turn around and say that they're not bound by Section 106 obligations because they've bought out the original developer. They run with the land is the phrase. And finally, some Section 106 agreements can be modified, can be discharged by agreement. So they can be changed during the course or after the development is complete. So that's a quick overview of the purpose of Section 106 obligations. And here's just an example of some of the Section 106 obligations that you might find. A lot of them are around education, healthcare, affordable housing, of course, highways, landscaping, and each of the Section 106 agreements will have a specific figure in for each of those contributions that's usually index linked, depending on various indexes. But what a lot of Section 106 agreements will have in, and by a lot I mean almost all, is a clause somewhere that will say that if that contribution hasn't been spent or committed to by the local authority or by the council, then the developer has a right to claim that money back. Usually the duration or the expiry date is 5 years or 10 years. It can be longer, can be shorter, depending on what the contribution is. But that expiry date does exist in pretty much all Section 106 agreements. And so this is the bit that often gets missed by developers because of the time frames involved. 5 or 10 years down the line, developers are focused on their current sites and the pipeline of sites. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's just to really flag that that's the clause that that can trigger the recovery of any unspent contributions. Now, the figure of unspent contributions is fairly eye-watering, and there was a report in October 2024 by the HBF, the Home Builders Federation, that said that local authorities in England and Wales are sitting on, and I've put the quotes in there myself because I feel like that's slightly inflammatory and maybe unfair to LPAs, but we'll talk about that in a couple of slides' time. But they're sitting on over 8 billion of infrastructure payments, of which 6 billion is unspent Section 106 contributions. So there's £6 billion worth of developer contributions that is in local planning authority accounts that's earmarked for community improvements that hasn't yet been spent, or at least hadn't been spent by October 2024. And you can see from the pie chart there the distribution of those contributions and what they are earmarked and ring-fenced for. So there's a lot of highways improvements, a lot of education improvements, social infrastructure improvements that haven't yet happened because those funds haven't been spent. Now, in terms of the age of those funds, from the same report, just over a fifth of them were within the last 1 or 2 years. Over half of them from the last 2 to 5 years. So when you consider that some contributions have a 5-year expiry date, then some of that 53% could be due, and then a quarter of them are over 5 years, or at least 5 years old. So would, in theory, be due depending on the contribution. And the same report says that in the last 5 years, only 20.6 million of unspent contributions has been recovered by developers. So it's a real drop in the ocean when you consider the overall £6 billion figure, which is based on HBF's research. There's a lot of money out there for the taking, so to speak. But let's just have a quick think about why contributions aren't being spent. And the first thing to say is that it's not down to laziness from local planning authorities. Okay, this is not a dig at planning officers, at local planning authorities in the slightest. We all know and are well aware that local planning authorities are severely under-resourced. And there was an HBF report from earlier this year that said that there was probably a shortfall of over 2,000 planning officers in local planning authorities across England and Wales. And there has been recent announcements from the government to fund the training of, I think, around 350 planning officers, but it's still a fairly small percentage of the overall number of officers who are required. So planning officers are not kicking back and sitting around doing nothing. I don't think any of us would really want to be a planning officer in a local planning authority, unless you are, in which case you will know firsthand the stresses that you're under. So under-resourcing is a key reason as to why contributions aren't being spent. The payment and the expenditure of contributions falls fairly far down the priority list. There may also be projects that get delayed for various issues. It could be procurement issues, so there could be strict procurement and governance rules which delay projects. There could be political issues. There could be changes in the local plan. There could be changes in MPs and whatever it might be to which could cause delays to the expenditure of Section 106 contributions. They might just be poorly tracked. Some of these are 10, 15, maybe 20 years old, and so it's no surprise that with turnover of staff or whatever it might be, that some contributions might fall through the cracks. And again, that's not a dig at local planning authorities. I think most developers will have similarly poor records from that length of time ago. Some Section 106 agreements might just have contributions that were perhaps relevant at the time, a decade or so ago, but may not be relevant for various reasons anymore. Wider kind of macro political changes could also affect the expenditure of Section 106 contributions. So a change from a Tory government to a Labour government could affect it, and local and regional political changes could also have an effect on the expenditure of contributions. And some LPAs may just be very risk averse. They may be overly conservative. They may be overthinking the expenditure of these funds for fear of kind of non-compliance or from challenge from developers or whatever it might be. So that's just 6 of probably the very many reasons why local authorities may not be spending Section 106 contributions. Now, thinking about it from the developer side of things, why aren't more unspent contributions being claimed? If there's £6 billion worth of contributions out there, why are developers not crawling all over themselves to claim that money back? Well, again, there's several reasons as to why this is. Firstly, as I said before, a lot of these expiry dates are kind of 5 or 10 years old on Section 106 contributions, by which time the development is finished. It's the folders are gathering dust in a drawer somewhere. The developers are focused on current and future sites, and those contributions are allowed for within the original viability. So there's no burning pressure to get that money back because it's already been budgeted for. As I mentioned, developers are often looking forwards. They're looking to next year and the year after, and they're so busy, certainly in the run up to half year and year end, they just don't have time to stop and think about whether they should go back 5 or 10 years and start reclaiming contributions. Again, like the LPAs, the filing of documents, the filing of payment records might not be very good or readily available, in which case the admin involved might be prohibitive in recovering Section 106 contributions. A lot of developers would actually prefer that their Section 106 contributions are used for their intended purpose. So they've got little to no desire to go out and chase that money and get that money back because they want it to be used for education improvements, they want it to be used for highway improvements and the like. So there's no desperate need to get that money back. This is probably the big one, and maybe the biggest one, is concerns around local authority relationships. So a lot of developers, are very concerned about how the recovery of unspent contributions could affect their relationship with the local planning authority, could affect maybe future planning decisions from that local planning authority. We'll go on to talk about that a bit later, but safe to say it's really more about how the developer approaches the local authority to recover that money, and in what manner they do so. If you were to lend someone £100 and say, I'll have that back from you if you've not spent it in a month, when a month comes around, you're probably not going to bang the door down and start slamming tables and demanding that money back. You're going to approach it in a collaborative manner, and that's how the developer and local planning authority relationship can go in this regard. And then finally, sometimes some of the contributions are such low value that actually it's not really worth pursuing. Not all contributions are hundreds of thousands of pounds. Some of them are a few thousand. But if developers were to go out and actively recover Section 106 contributions, there's several benefits that this brings. First of all, is the obvious one, is it boosts your cash flow. All of a sudden, you've got a few tens or a few hundreds of thousands of pounds in your account that you may not have previously cash flowed for. That's always going to help. Cash is king. It can always also enhance the margins of schemes, therefore improving the financial health of the developer overall. It also demonstrates proactive financial management and actually can support future LPA negotiations. So this goes back to the relationship point that we talked about earlier. And if a local planning authority recognises that a developer understands the process, that they value compliance, that they value a collaboration, then that can only strengthen relationships between the two parties. There shouldn't be an us and them between planners and developers. It should very much be a collaborative approach, or pulling in the same direction to try and solve and ease the housing crisis. If you're a developer with stakeholders, then them seeing that you have gone after unspent contribution recovery shows that you have got good financial management of your developments, that you understand the value of recovery. Those funds can then be reinvested at the developer's discretion into current sites or future sites, in improving communities, in improving amenities, however they might want to spend that. And as per the third point, the recovery of contributions will encourage local planning authorities to perhaps be a bit more proactive in future in spending Section 106 contributions if they know and have the relationship with developers that that they will be politely knocking on the door in 5 or 10 years and asking for that money back. Okay, so coming towards the end, then we'll go through some of the common concerns and then how those can be managed. So the first two really are what we've talked about. So recovering funds will damage our relationship with the LPA. Recovery feels confrontational. And so the response to that really, and the way to approach it, is that it doesn't have to be confrontational. It can be collaborative, it can be respectful, it can be sensitive. As a developer, you have a right to recover this money if it's due to you. So you're not doing anything wrong by asking the local authority whether they've spent that money, and if they haven't, can you please have it back? It all goes back to how you approach the local planning authority in a transparent and a collaborative way. This might not necessarily be a concern, but it's certainly a thought that the developers have budgeted for the expenditure, so there's no real priority to recover it, and that's fine. But who wouldn't want an extra bit of money in their pocket or in their bank account? Certainly, again, half-year, year-end cash flow is absolutely vital, and so if you can get some money back for those key moments in your financial calendar, then why wouldn't you at least try? We would rather the money be spent on the community. Yeah, wouldn't we all? That would be fantastic. But if a local planning authority hasn't spent the money in 10, 15 years, you could come to the conclusion that they're probably not going to spend it in the next 5 or 10 years. So if you recover that money, you may have the flexibility, you may have a bit more agency to actually go out and reinvest that money into the local community yourselves through current or future schemes. And then finally, we haven't got any accurate records of contribution payments. We've all got folders in the cupboard that we haven't opened in many, many years. That's fine. Again, it comes back to collaboration with the local authority, working with the local authority. They will have records, or they may have records between you. You'll be able to get to the bottom of when contributions were made. You'll be able to uncover old Section 106 agreements, that kind of thing. So this all comes back to good relationships with the local planning authority. It doesn't have to be a confrontational thing, reclaiming money. Okay, then last couple of slides. So I said that we would have a practical checklist for developers. So the first thing to do would be to go back and look for and find old Section 106 agreements. A lot of them are held on planning portals, so there is an online database or an online record of Section 106 agreements if you're unable to find them in your bottom drawer. Make a note of the key dates, make a note of repayment deadlines, create a schedule of all the contributions that you've made, and from those key dates you can work out whether those contributions are due or not. Submit your request to the local planning authority. It's as simple as just firing them an email, and then, as I keep saying, and I won't say collaboratively again, but engage with the local planning authorities and work with them to understand whether any contributions have been spent, and if they haven't, how you can go about recovering that money. But we can do all that for you. We have a service that we've recently launched where we can take all that admin off your hands. We can have a look at all your Section 106 agreements. You'll need to provide us some information on payment dates and so on. But again, if you haven't got all that information, that's fine. We can engage with local authorities. We can facilitate meetings. We can liaise with them to help identify whether contributions have been spent. And if not, we will take on the admin of recovering that money for you. So that's really it. We are spread across the country, so we've got I think it's 9 offices across the country. So we're well placed to support you in any of your needs and any of your Section 106 recovery requirements. And again, it's just another photo of me and my contact details in case you wanted to get in touch. So we've got a couple of minutes. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat. We've got one from Ross. You mentioned that the obligation to pay goes with the land. Who is able to recover the unspent Section 106? Is it the party who paid or the current landowner? That is a good question. I will need to have a look into that. My feeling is that it will be the party who paid, but Ross, if you're able to drop your details into the chat, I will come back to you on that one. That is a good question. If there's any other questions, please pop them in now. We'll give it a few seconds. Okay. Well, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate you taking some time out from your Wednesdays to listen to me. If you want to get in touch, my details are on the screen. Please do fire me an email and get in touch with me through LinkedIn if you wanted to chat a bit more about how we can help you recover Section 106 contributions. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody.